For this project, I did use two different machines. So I used my 46 pin machine, and this is for the bottom piece, which is actually kind of optional because I'll show you another option that you have. But then I also used the 22 pin, and this was to make the tubes. So you'll need at least the 22 pin, and then you can do a crochet bottom, or there's some other options that you have. So 22 pin for the bulk of the project, and then if you have a 46 or even a 48 pin machine, you'll be able to use that to create the bottom piece. So our bag is essentially made up of 7 total pieces. And so each of those pieces, you're gonna end up with 6 tubes, and each of those tubes, the size can vary. So for this sample that I did 24 rows with this yarn right here, and it was perfect for this toilet paper holder. And it would also be a really great size if you were using it for something a little smaller, like dice or holding something. This would be a good size. For this, because I want to carry it like a bag, and also I wanted to get this kind of checkerboard pattern, I ended up making each tube with 32 rows, and that's 16 and 16, and that works out just fine. You could make it a little bit bigger. You could even go, if you wanted to do 3 colors on each of these tubes, you certainly could, and you can always just do them all the same color. But the whole purpose or the benefit of having 6 different tubes is that you can play with the colors and get fun patterns. If not, as I mentioned, you could just probably do a big giant tube and have a very similar result. So we have our 6 tubes right here. Each of these tubes you are going to slip stitch or crochet finish both ends together on the bottom and the top. I am leaving my top waist yarn on right now. I haven't quite finished it because the way that I'm going to put this together, I'm actually going to attach my 6 tubes to the center piece, which we're going to talk about next. And then after I do that, we're going to graft it together, and then I'm going to go around the top and finish it with crochet. So that's a personal preference that I have. Also, it'll give me the ability to add a drawstring a little bit easier. So we have our 6 tube pieces here. Now for the center piece, this is where you can be creative. You can kind of play around with this and see what works best for you. So for my first sample, I actually used the knitting machine, and I used that 46 pin machine. I knit 15 rows, and then I just cinched one end. Actually, I cinched both ends, and then I put a piece of cardboard on the inside to give it some stability. I really like the idea of upcycling and reusing any of those things that would typically end up in the trash. So I did use cardboard for this one, but because I am going to be using this bag as kind of a day-to-day bag, I want something a little bit more water resistant, we'll say. So a couple of options. As I mentioned, we have the option, and I made a sample here just to show you what it would look like if you were going to be using your 46 pin machine. So with the 46 pin, all I did was cast on, knit 15, actually with this one I did 16 rows, and then I'm just going to cinch both of the ends. So we're just going to pull the drawstring, and then you'll tie that off, and then you'll cinch the other side as well. But before you do that, this is where you can add your cardboard if you want to, or if you have something like this is from like an oxy lid. I cut this out. This is what I'm going to be using in conjunction with some crochet, which I'll show you in just a second. But you could also just put it in the center here and then cinch the opposite side together, and then you would have a pretty sturdy bottom. So that's how I created the bottom for my first sample. Now, another option that you have, you could find plastic that is meant to be, craft plastic like this, and you could do some fun pattern in here. You could go through and do like a black and white check or whatever color scheme you're going for. It's still malleable, it still moves, but it does have some breathing in here. So if you're gonna use it, let's say for like a gym bag or something like that, or maybe if you're traveling and you want to use it to put your, socks or dirty clothes in, something like this might be a really good choice. And then you could just cut out that circle. By the way, the measurement for the center, so this is going to be important because each of these, if you're using a 22 pin machine, which was what I used for each of these tubes, to get the optimum center, you're going to look at about 5 to 5.5, maybe 5 to 6 inch diameter of the circle that you want to have. That just makes it a little bit easier when we graft all of these onto the circle piece. If it's not big enough, you'll see that you'll run out of room, and then you're really going to have to like cinch it together, and it'll change the shape a little bit. But if all you have is a really small piece, you can certainly use that. All right, so let me show you what I am going to be doing. So I actually crocheted. So I'm also a crocheter. I love crochet. I wish I could do it more often, but it hurts my hands. It takes a little bit longer. So this is what I ended up doing. I just crocheted a flat circle and then I turned it over and then I created this kind of interior sleeve, as it were. And the reason for that is now I can take this piece of plastic, slip it on in here, just like that. And what I could do is go around a few more rows and do some decreases and totally cover this up so you can't see it. And in fact, I think I am going to do that. And this is going to be my bottom. So you have the stability of plastic. We're reusing this plastic that was going to end up in the trash. Also, it's water resistant and you'll be able to throw this in the washer, or what I really recommend anyway with any of your projects is really hand washing them anyway. So this is what I'm going to do and I'll finish that off. But again, whichever type of circular bottom you'd like to use is totally your personal preference. But what it'll start to look like, as you can see, once you have your centerpiece, we're going to put all of our little pieces around it, just like this. And this one is 5.5. So if you're wondering when I said, measurements, how big 5 to 6 inches, this is what it looks like with 5.5 inches. But again, your yarn, your tension, your machine, all of those can vary. So I'm giving you a little range here, but I found this 5.5 inches is perfect for me to graft all of this together. So you have your centerpiece, you have your 6 pieces, your 6 tubes right here. And when you put it all together, you're going to start by stitching the tubes to the center. So you want to make sure you do that piece first before you graft anything together, just to ensure that everything's aligned perfectly, and it's going to make it a lot easier. So I'm going to finish up this centerpiece and tie that off first. Then I'm going to start on attaching this in just a moment. So I'll meet you back here once I finish this centerpiece. Now I just finished with this. So now we have this nice sealed little piece right here. So then to make your life easier, it is going to make sense to use a stitch marker and come back to your work and stitch your pieces in place. So now that I've stitched all of the tubes to the base, the next step is going to be to graft the sides together. So we're going to be stitching all of the sides for all of the tubes together, and that's going to give us that circular piece we're looking for. Now, something to note, actually a couple things I wanted to point out. You'll notice that the ends are now finished. Well, when I first started this project, I had left these ends to finish later. I wanted to test to see which is easier for me, doing them both at the same time or doing them at separate times. I would recommend for you actually finishing both ends at the same time before you start your project. I think that will actually make things a little bit easier. Now that we have that done, we're going to graft our pieces. So this piece is going to be a little bit more meticulous when you're grafting together than this piece right here, because with this one, all we were really doing was trying to get a nice clean mattress stitch. We weren't really lining anything up. But with this one, as we can see here, we need to make sure that they are lined up perfectly so then we get that checkered look. If not, we're going to have some issues like this. We don't want that to happen. So if you place a stitch marker at those 2 stitches to make sure that when you get there, you go through those 2, and then you'll also want to mark the ends as well. And then you're just going to do one at a time. So the easiest way I found is just to do a mattress stitch, and that's going to give us really pretty clean stitches. We just want to make sure that they are aligned and not twisted before we begin. So we'll go through and we'll stitch all of those sides together, and then we'll come back together and go on to the next step. After you graft all the sides together, it'll look something like this. And you could simply weave a drawstring around the top and call it done. But let's look at another option. Now we saw this option at the beginning of the video with just that drawstring, so this is still cute. But we took that little bucket that we had, that circular shape, and this is how I made it one of my favorite projects I've ever made on the circular knitting machine. So I added a little crochet edge to the top of it with some holes to add a strap, and then I made this cotton strap, and then I attached it with some of these little loops down here to the bag. I also added an optional interior, and then I also used my Cricut and made a little branded label to go on the front. So this is one option that you can do with that same pattern. And I'm probably going to make a ton more of these little mini backpacks because they are truly one of my new favorite designs on the circular knitting machine. So hopefully you enjoyed this as much as I did. Don't forget to check out my knitting machine playlist and let me know what you think.